Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony will begin in 20 minutes. At this time, we ask that you please move towards your seats.
Back south. Once you settle down a little bit, say all that again.
Okay. You said we're going to be delayed, Mr. Mason? Ladies and gentlemen, The ceremony will begin in 15 minutes. Please begin to take your seats and silence all electronic devices.
Perfect.
Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. Right now, and they're still playing.
Yeah, stand by for your 2-minute warning.
Okay, I'll wait for them to stop. So, should I rely on you for my 2-minute warning
Yep,
cue?
allow me. Now, she's good.
Okay. Okay.
All the black 4-stars on it. Whole first row, all African American 4-stars.
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, this is an indoor ceremony. The ceremony will begin in 2 minutes. At this time, please be seated and silence all electronic devices. Thank you. How you doing, sir? Nice to meet you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Major General Mark T. Simmerly, Commanding General of the United States Army Combined Armed Support Command, and Senior Commander of Fort Lee, welcome to the post-redesignation ceremony, honoring Lieutenant General Retired Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. Please take your seats. The official party for today's ceremony is Major General Mark T. Simmerly, Commander, Combined Armed Support Command, and General Charles R. Hamilton, Commander, United States Army Materiel Command. The official party will be joined on stage by Lieutenant General Gregg, Mr. Stanley Early, and Miss Judith Early, son and daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. Ladies and gentlemen, the salute battery will fire 15 rounds during the rendering of honors. Major General Simmerly has deferred honors to Lieutenant General Gregg. Please stand for the arrival of the official party as they join the honoree and representatives from the Adams Early family on stage, and remain standing for the rendering of honors, the singing of the national anthem by the Prince George County High School Choir, and the invocation given by Chaplain Vincent T. Myers.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to ask God's blessing on our time here today. Would you please join me? Father in heaven, thank you for today and its significance. Before the foundation was laid for this world, you set today apart to celebrate the tremendous accomplishments of two incredible lives given over to the service of their nation. And as we redesignate our installation as Fort Gregg-Adams, Father, I pray we would be mindful that to you names are no small matter. In fact, it seems that any time you were about to do a mighty work in the lives of your people, it started with a name. I think of Abram, who you renamed Abraham before he embarked on his faithful quest for a new land. I think of Israel, who you renamed Jacob as he became a great patriarch in the lineage of your chosen people. I think of Simon, whom you gave the name Peter as you called him to a life of service, leadership, and sacrifice. And of course, I think of Paul, who was formerly named Saul. You used him to travel to the known world at the time to share your amazing, unrelenting love with a people who had been forgotten and dismissed. Yes, Lord, it does seem that names matter because they symbolize a new chapter, perhaps even a fresh start. It does seem that names are not about where we have been, but where we are going. And it is true, Father, then I pray that as we redesignate, we would all strive to honor the legacy being unveiled today in all that we do. And as always, I pray that the common grace of this day, that it would point us to your specific grace that you give us through your Son. And it's in his name that I pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. At this time, we would like to extend a special welcome to our honored guests. Lieutenant General Gregg is joined by Mrs. Ellie Pikelick and his daughter, Miss Alicia Collier. Mr. Stanley Early and Miss Judith Early, son and daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams and sister-in-law, Miss Dolly Adams. We are also honored to welcome our distinguished guests today. Please hold your applause until the end. Descendants, supporters, and friends of the 6th 888 Central Postal Directory Battalion, Mr. Guy Kiyokawa, General and Mrs. Charles Hamilton, General Retired and Mrs. Johnny Wilson, General Retired and Mrs. Larry Ellis, General Retired and Mrs. Dennis Vi, Admiral Retired Michelle Howard, Command Sergeant Major Jimmy Sellers, Secretary Craig Crenshaw, our elected officials, Mr. and Mrs. Mike Flanagan, Miss Lillian Anita Dixon, Miss Nancy John Louise, and Mr. Bobby Henry, our civilian aides to the Secretary of the Army, Gold Star family members, members of the Naming Commission, and the Underwood family. Today, we celebrate the redesignation of Fort Lee to Fort Gregg-Adams. For over a century, this post has been a key training installation supporting the United States Army and our nation. Established as Camp Lee in 1917, the installation became a permanent fixture and home to the Quartermaster Corps during the Second World War and the Adjutant General School from 1945 to 1951. Following the implementation of the 2005 base realignment and closure legislation, Fort Lee became home to the Ordnance Corps, Transportation Corps, and the Army Sustainment University. Today, the installation is home to the United States Army Sustainment Center of Excellence, which trains and educates 240,000 students annually. At this time, I would like to welcome our host for today's ceremony, Major General Mark T. Simmerly, Commanding General, United States Army Combined Armed Support Command, and Senior Commander to Fort Lee.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the home of Army sustainment, Fort Gregg-Adams, Virginia. Thank you all for joining us to celebrate two exceptional American soldiers, Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. And to formally redesignate this indispensable Army post in their honor. I'd like to think that we thought of everything today, but I wish we had issued some fans to you all in the audience. The service and sacrifice of Lieutenant General Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Adams reflect the courage and the character of the millions of men and women who have worn this uniform and defended this nation. This historic day belongs to American soldiers, present, past, and future. Before we continue, permit me to recognize some of our distinguished visitors, our guests of honor, General Arthur Gregg and family, Mrs. Stanley Early III and Ms. Judith Early, son and daughter of Colonel Charity Adams, Honorable Guy Kiyokawa, Acting Deputy of the Department of Veteran Affairs, General Charles Hamilton, the Commanding General of the United States Army Materiel Command, and his wife, Regina, Army and joint senior leaders, state and community leaders and officials from Virginia and the Central Virginia region, and members of the Naming Commission. All of our past commanders, commandants, command sergeants major, and command chief warrant officers, the veterans, family, and friends of the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion. Command Sergeant Major Marco Torres and I, along with the entire Fort Gregg-Adams community, are honored by your presence. As always, thanks to the Tradoc Band for your consistently outstanding musical support. Special thanks as well to the Prince George High School Chorus Group, and as you will hear soon, the Fort Gregg-Adams Soldier Chorus for your performances today. Please join me applauding these talented young musicians. Finally, to the entire team here at Fort Gregg-Adams for their work, months in the making for this event and for this day. You have risen to the occasion. I look forward to telling you about, thank you. I look forward to telling you the powerful story of these two soldiers we've gathered here to honor. Before I do, however, I would like to say a few words about the installation that now bears their name. The area surrounding this installation has played a critical role in our Army's history. American soldiers fought the British near here in 1781. 83 years later, U.S. Army soldiers waged the Civil War's decisive battle around Petersburg. In 1917, the Army established Camp Lee to train soldiers for combat in World War I, and reactivated the base a quarter of a century later to prepare our soldiers for World War II. On this day, 73 years ago, the Army redesignated Camp Lee as Fort Lee in recognition of the enduring importance of this base to the Army and to the nation. Since then, this installation has become the home of Army sustainment. Today, we proudly say support starts here. On this installation, we train and educate a third of the Army every year, and we develop the concepts, doctrine, and organizations that sustain our soldiers and defend our nation. We excel at our mission due to the outstanding men and women who serve here, and because of the strong tradition of support we receive from our neighboring communities, the cities of Hopewell, Petersburg, and Colonial Heights, and Prince George, Chesterfield, and Dinwiddie counties. As Fort Gregg-Adams, we will continue to accomplish our mission. And now let me tell you a little bit about Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg, Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. Arthur Gregg grew up on a South Carolina farm, and at the age of 13, his father sent him to Newport News, Virginia. In 1946, he enlisted in the United States Army. Assigned to a truck company in Germany, Private Gregg quickly earned promotion and became the unit supply sergeant. In 1950, He completed Officer Candidate School, received a commission in the Quartermaster Corps, and attended the Officer Basic Course here at Fort Lee. Upon graduation, Second Lieutenant Gregg remained here as an instructor. During this time, he also met, courted, and married the former Charlene McDaniel of Roanoke, Virginia. The Gregg family served assignments at various installations at home and abroad. In 1966, he assumed command of the 96th Supply and Services Battalion at Fort Riley as it was preparing for war. In Vietnam, Gregg's battalion helped expand Cam Ranh Bay into the Army's largest supply depot and a critical part of the theater logistics network. At the same time, Gregg and his team reorganized a broken tactical supply system and dramatically improved its speed and responsiveness. In 1972, the Army promoted him to Brigadier General, making him the first black quartermaster officer to achieve that rank. As a general officer, Gregg distinguished himself as one of the Army's finest senior logisticians. In 1977, President Carter assigned Gregg as the Director of Logistics for the Joint Staff. He also approved his nomination for appointment to Lieutenant General, making Arthur Gregg the first black Army officer to achieve 3-star rank. In 1979, Lieutenant General Gregg became the Army's first black officer to serve as a Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics. In 1981, at a ceremony held just a few hundred yards from here, General Gregg retired after more than 35 years of dedicated service to the Army and the nation. In retirement, he's continued his close support to the Quartermaster Foundation and the Army Logistics branches. In 2016, the Army created the Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg Sustainment Leadership Award to recognize outstanding sustainment leaders. General Gregg was appropriately the first recipient. And now let me tell you about another legendary Army sustainer. Like Arthur Gregg, Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams grew up in the segregated South and endured the daily oppression of the Jim Crow laws. She proved an exceptional student, graduating at the age of 15 as class valedictorian and earning a scholarship to Wilberforce University. After college, she returned to Columbia to teach high school science and math. In July of 1942, she and 439 other women arrived at Fort Des Moines, Iowa, to attend the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps' very first officer candidate school. While much of the actual training was integrated, Adams and her black classmates were segregated into a separate platoon. In August, graduates received their commissions in alphabetical order, making Charity Adams the first black female officer commissioned in the United States Army. As a newly commissioned officer, Adams commanded Company 8, which received, equipped, fed, and housed hundreds of black women training to become bakers, cooks, clerks, and truck drivers. In December of 1942, Adams and 3 other black women were promoted early to the rank of first officer, equivalent to an Army captain. In May of 1943, the Army promoted Adams to major in the newly redesignated Women's Army Corps, or WACS. And in December of 1944, she was selected to lead the first, and as it turned out, the only multiracial battalion of African American and Hispanic women to serve overseas in war. When it reached Birmingham, England, Adams' unit of nearly 900 women was organized as the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion, with orders to reduce the European theater's backlog of 3 million letters and packages. Operating out of dark, rat-infested warehouses, including 6 airplane hangars stuffed with Christmas packages, Adams' battalion worked around the clock to redirect mail to waiting soldiers. The Army expected the job to take 6 months. The 6888 completed its mission in 3. In April of 1945, the 688 relocated to France, where Adams soldiers continued to provide postal support to the theater. When the Red Cross built a separate recreational facility for black soldiers, Adams asked for soldiers to boycott the facility, and they complied. When the Army formed a women's all-American all-star basketball team and invited several soldiers of the 688 to play, but rescinded the invitation upon learning they were black. Prior to her departure from the Army in March of 1946, Adams was promoted to lieutenant colonel, making her the highest-ranking black woman in the United States military at the time. After her military service, Adams earned her graduate degree and married a young medical student, Stanley Early Jr. They relocated to Dayton, Ohio, where Charity Adams Early became a prominent civil rights activist and educator. She died in 2002, survived by her two children, Stanley Early III and Judith Early. In 2018, the Army established a memorial at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, to honor Adams and the 688th. In 2019, the Army awarded the battalion with a Unit Citation Medal. And in 2022, Congress voted to recognize the battalion with a Congressional Gold Medal. Today, we recognize Arthur Gregg and Charity Adams for their courage, their dignity, and their hope. Despite growing up in a segregated nation, these two pioneers volunteered to serve that nation in uniform. Their service, both in war and peace, demonstrates that courage is not confined or defined by a single race or gender. As a young officer, Charity Adams repeatedly took a stand against the notion of separate but equal facilities for black and white soldiers. And she literally bet her bars when a senior officer patronized her in front of her troops. Offered the chance to lead the first black women's unit to deploy into harm's way, she leaped at the opportunity. During her brief but extraordinary military career, she repeatedly exceeded expectations, and to borrow her own humble words, made it as a WAC officer. As a young lieutenant, Arthur Gregg worked, trained, and taught in integrated units, but he was not welcome to dine at the Fort Lee Officers Club or swim at the Fort Lee pool, while he and his wife lived in segregated quarters on post. Despite these slights, he chose Army life as his career, commanding troops in Vietnam, serving in key logistical positions around the world, and rising to become the first black Army officer promoted to lieutenant colonel or lieutenant general. In addition to their courage, it's worth noting the dignity with which these two outstanding leaders met and overcame the various challenges in their lives. I mentioned some examples of the racism and sexism they confronted. I should also acknowledge the challenges inherent in every leadership position they held, especially those associated with leading men and women in a combat zone. Arthur Gregg and Charity Adams were exceptional leaders, in no small part because they led with dignity. They looked the part. They maintained their composure, and they led by example. In short, these two epitomize the professional qualities we seek in every leader who wears the uniform of the United States Army. Finally, let me just say a few words about hope, because hope is what I see when I consider the achievements of these two great Americans. By exceeding all expectations, by breaking through visible and invisible barriers, and by doing so with courage and dignity, they offer their fellow Americans hope for a better tomorrow. The Army provided them with a way to serve their nation and build better lives. They seized the opportunity to be all they could be. It's been 81 years since Charity Adams was commissioned as the first black woman in the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps, 76 years since General Gregg enlisted as an Army private. We've come a long way since then, and today's redesignation is yet another example of our nation's and our Army's progress. The next Charity Adams and the next Arthur Gregg are out there right now, leading soldiers with courage and dignity, setting the example for all of us, and inspiring hope in the next generation that is the future of our Army. That future begins right here at Fort Gregg-Adams, Virginia, where our motto remains, support starts here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Charles R. Hamilton, 21st Commanding General, United States Army Materiel Command.
Well, as most of you can imagine, I am standing here just humbled and swollen with a lot of pride for General Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Adams and their family. Let's give them another big hand. So good afternoon, and General Assembly, I really want to thank you for hosting today's ceremony, and really thank you for those profound remarks and for your leadership here at CASCOM. And Fort Gregg-Adams, support starts here. Today marks an incredible time in our military and nation's history as we honor two trailblazers that embody character, commitment, and courage. Of the 9 Army installations that are being redesignated, today marks the first redesignation in the name of Black soldiers. And while not completely unprecedented, this is the first time in modern American history that an Army installation is being named in honor of a living soldier. So I am honored and humbled just to be a part of it. And I'm sure we're all honored and humbled to be in the presence of Lieutenant General Gregg, the members of the Gregg-Adams and Early families, and the families of the veterans who served in the 6th 888. Thank you all so much for being here. Your presence truly honors us, the installation, and the Army we serve. To our distinguished guests, our elected and appointed officials, thank you also for taking the time to be here today. It is great to see community leaders and members here today. The Army's strong connection to our communities is essential to our overall success, so again, thank you for attending. Thank all of you for joining us today as the United States Army celebrates the legacy of 2 trailblazing sustainment professionals and 1 legendary sustainment installation. We honor and commemorate legends for their achievements. By doing so, we preserve their legacy and ensure that their contributions are remembered for generations to come, and to provide an example to those generations and an example to inspire them. Also an example to show them how they can even do more to achieve even greater accomplishments. That's why we take such great care in naming of military installations. It's a real opportunity, as you can see today, to make a difference. In the Army, we believe where soldiers work, train, and live should reflect our Army values: loyalty, duty, respect, honor, integrity, personal courage, and selfless service. That last one, selfless service, means putting the welfare of the nation, of the Army, and the soldiers to your left and right above yourself. Selfless service is the heart of what it means to be a sustainment professional. Selfless service is also at the heart of this installation's mission as the home of Army sustainment. So just as our installations reflect Army values, our installations are named after those who exemplify those Army values. The commission that examined redesignating some of our installations, including this one, spoke with military commanders, community leaders, soldiers, civilian employees, and the general public. They received more than 34,000 submissions, including 3,600 unique proposals for names. As the commission did its work, as they looked at the home of Army sustainment, the names of two legends, trailblazers, icons from the sustainment community clearly rose to the top. Leaders, sustainers, and soldiers whose integrity, personal courage, and selfless service exemplify the very best of the United States Army. Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. The Army is proud to honor these American heroes who inspire hope and whose courage, dignity, patriotism, and service exemplify the very best of the United States military, and who instill tremendous pride in sustainment professionals everywhere. The Naming Commission's goal was to inspire service members and military communities with names or values that have meaning and that underpin the core responsibility of the military: to defend the Constitution of the United States. Redesignating this post in honor of Lieutenant General Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Adams clearly accomplishes this goal, and their names, their examples, will inspire generations of soldiers to come. Years from now, when young soldiers come to Fort Gregg-Adams and learn about the seemingly insurmountable obstacles set before Lieutenant Colonel Adams and what few resources she and her battalion were given to accomplish the mission and the adversity she had to endure, and then when they learn about the success she eventually had, those soldiers will walk away inspired to overcome their own obstacles, inspired to overcome their own challenges, and inspired to overcome their own adversities. I had the honor of meeting Lieutenant General Gregg in the late 1990s. As I went about my own career, I aspired, like so many others, to be like Lieutenant General Gregg. He's still active in the sustainment community, as he is also active in the Army community and abroad. He still teaches, mentors, and continues to pour into so many of us. In his own words, Lieutenant General Gregg taught us that an effective leader must put the mission and those you are leading first and put himself or herself last. He is the consummate mentor, the ultimate leader. He embodies the notion of changing other people's lives or giving back. He embodies, as well as Lieutenant Colonel Adams, selfless service. Years from now, when young soldiers come to Fort Gregg-Adams and learn about Lieutenant General Gregg's leadership philosophy, they will also be inspired that he put the mission and those being led first and put themselves last. Lieutenant General Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Adams are trailblazers, and they have blazed a path that countless others have followed. And now, with their names permanently affixed to this installation, their examples will live on and continue to inspire future generations of soldiers and sustainers and the nation for many years to come. And that will ultimately make our Army even stronger than it is today. May God bless all of you, all those who work, train, and live on Fort Gregg-Adams, and these great United States of America. People first, winning matters, Army strong.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm welcome for Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg.
General and flag officers, senior executive service members, command sergeant major, distinguished guests, members of the Adams and Gregg families, friends and supporters, good afternoon. Thank you for your support for Colonel Adams and me, and thank you for being here today. I want to give a very special thanks to General Mark Semele and his amazing team for their outstanding work in planning and executing today's redesignation ceremony. I greatly appreciate their many months of planning and actions to bring us to this moment. To the Adams family and supporters, I want you to know how proud I am to share this very special honor with Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. Her performance in getting the mail delivered in a very chaotic environment has made the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion a legend that gets bigger every day. We have heard from General Hamilton and General Semele. They reflected on the historical significance of the change in the name of this great Army base. Therefore, I want to spend my time sharing with you my great appreciation for some of the people who helped to make me who I am and my name on this historic base. First, I give recognition to my parents, Robert and Ethel Gregg, who taught me the value of hard work, responsibility, and showing respect for others. To my brother Joseph and his family, who welcomed me into their home when I was 13, following the passing of my mother. This allowed me to attend and to graduate from Huntington High School in Newport News, Virginia. I give special thanks to my late wife, Charlene, who was an outstanding Army wife and a loving companion. She made life great for my daughters and me, and faithfully supported my career. Without her love and support, I would not be standing here today. Corporal Mayberry, my platoon sergeant during basic training at Camp Crowder, Missouri in 1946. His teaching and personal example served me well during my career. To the officers and non-commissioned officers at my officers candidate school at Fort Riley, Kansas, who taught me leadership and military tactics. They helped me to develop the knowledge and confidence to lead. To the officers and men of the 96th Supply and Service Battalion, who developed an outstanding logistics base in Vietnam and supported our great Army in 1966 and 67. Command of that battalion was the most satisfying assignment of my Army career. I salute the staff of the Army War College and the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University for preparing me to operate at the senior levels of government. During my career, I had many mentors whose influence was powerful, especially the late Major General Joe Pikely, who is well known here at Fort Gregg-Adams, and the late General George Blanchard, who is the Commander-in-Chief, United States Army, Europe. I'm pleased to note that the widow of General Pikely is with us today. I'm grateful to the organizations and individuals who supported my name for this base before the Naming Commission. I give special thanks to Congressman McEachin, who represented Virginia's 4th Congressional District, where this base is located. He and his staff recommended me to the Naming Commission and followed up with the commission throughout the process. The congressman recommendation was joined by one from the Rocks, a mentoring organization focused on military personnel, where I have been a member since the mid-70s, and Excelsior University in New York, where I chaired the board for more than 10 years. Many individuals also supported my name, and when the commission convened a hearing in this community, some local citizens voiced their support directly to the commission. I'm grateful to all. I hope that this community will look with pride on the name Fort Gregg-Adams, and that the name will instill pride in every soldier entering our mighty gates. Thank you very, very much.
At this time, I would like to invite Major General Simmerly, General Hamilton, Lieutenant General Gregg, Colonel James Hoyman, Mr. Early, and Miss Early to come forward for the publishing of the Army General Order, redesignating Fort Lee to Fort Gregg-Adams, followed by the official unveiling of the Fort Gregg-Adams signs. Effective 27 April 2023, Fort Lee Installation Code 51315 is redesignated as Fort Gregg-Adams in accordance with Section 370 of the William M. Thornberry National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021 and General Order Number 2023-08. Signed, the Honorable Christine E. Wormuth, Secretary of the Army. At this time, the Army Training and Doctrine Band will perform America the Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for a special rendition of the Army song by the CASCOM Soldier Choir.
March along, sing a song, with the army of the free. Count the brave, count the true, who have fought to victory. We're the army and proud of our name. We're the army and proudly proclaim. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fight until the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's hi, hi, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence loud and strong. For where we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.
At this time, please stand for the departure of the official party, our honoree, and representatives from the Adams Early family. Thank you so much. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause for the team of talented individuals from across Fort Gregg-Adams and our local community whose professionalism and dedicated efforts enabled the successful execution of today's special event. This concludes today's ceremony. On behalf of Major General Mark T. Simmerly and the United States Army Combined Armed Support Command, we would like to thank you for joining us today. The ceremony site will remain open until 15:30. Please feel free to remain in the area for fellowship, visit the static displays outside of the tent, take photos in front of the Gregg-Adams signs, or move inside the Gregg-Adams Club to view the portraits of Lieutenant General Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Adams in the ballroom. We invite you to visit the U.S. Army Quartermaster and Women's Museums and our Ordnance Training Support Facility located at 20th Street in the vicinity of Adams Avenue and Shop Road. We also invite you to be a part of today's historic redesignation by recording a message at one of our 2 video guest book stations for the soldiers who will train at Fort Gregg-Adams in the future. We are Fort Gregg-Adams, and support starts here. Be all you can be.
for it, wait for it. So, Sergeant Smith's going to bring the van for the larger instruments so we can load the larger instruments, and then I'll be moving back towards behind the bowling alley. Everybody else, we're going to walk to the bus. We're going to put our instruments in our cases, and then we'll have, let's say 1,500, everybody be back on the bus, ready to depart. So if you want to eat, use the restroom, you have time to do that. Cool?
1,500?
Great job, everybody.